So today we're working on a 2014 Porsche Cayman S, and the intent is to install camber plates in the front. The setup currently on this car is entirely stock suspension. We have the stock springs, stock S, brakes have been upgraded, but the suspension is entirely stock. And we want a little more camber so that the wear pattern on track is a little better. Here we've chosen Elephant Racing. This is the new unit. It's got a nice strut nut. The strut nut on the stock is a little buried in there, and you need special tools to be able to torque against those two. But here they've exposed it a little more, making it easier to put a wrench on it. It's got weather seals, because my intent is to keep this friendly for on the street. This one is marked left, moving the top of the strut inward. So this is going to go that orientation. It will also retain a bearing. This is a 3-part bearing, roller bearing, that will go between the top of the spring and the camber plate, like so, which means that every time you turn the steering wheel and the spring and strut underneath this camber plate is turning, it will rotate against that roller bearing. Some of the aftermarket ones skip that. These guys do offer 2 different models. The second model is for when you're running coilovers and not the stock wider spring setup. And my intent is to do this without having to remove the strut and without having to undo all of this. So I'm going to compress this spring and then undo the nut at the top of the piston and the nuts at the top of the camber plate up here. And then this should drop down enough and give us enough room so that we can take off the existing pieces and put the new pieces on top of the strut without having to do more than a full droop that we're in now. So currently we're on quick jacks. We need to remove one end of the drop link because the drop link will put tension on that stops us going to a little beyond droop and will interfere with the lower control arm. We can probably do it. I'm going to do it at the bottom. You could also do it at the top here. There's a little hex there where you can put a slim spanner on. And then the nut for this upper end is 63 foot-pounds, 85 Newton meters. But I chose not to do this upper nut. I chose to do the bottom one. And now if we go down to the bottom one. So the link here that I'm going to undo is a 16mm wrench and a T30 Torx to hold the shaft still. The manual does call for this nut to be replaced on every use, and the tightening torque spec is 30 foot-pounds, which is 40 Newton meters. And then after that initial tightening, an additional 30 degrees in rotation, which is why they want you to replace the nut every time. So I'm going to remove this. So that came out very easily, and there was no tension on it. To compress this spring and then keep it compressed so that we have enough space when it's under full droop. Now, in order to do that, I've used a regular trolley jack, and I've mounted it under the lower control arm, pressing on that firm bit of metal with a little pad. It is tempting to jack it up by the disc, but the problem with that is the disc can roll away. So in order to be more stable, we do this, and I've jacked it up until the mount for this corner has just come off the quick jack. So now we have as much weight as we can on that spring. We just need to keep it compressed. So I've got this now fully compressed. The problem is these are a little large. So a better idea is to slot these in when it's uncompressed and then tighten them by hand as the spring compresses. So we are in full droop, and I've slotted these in where they'll fit. I've angled them in so that this won't interfere as we go up. especially on this side. This one fit in here. This one has no chance of fitting in here, just too tight. These may look like they're not engaging, but they're engaging on the far side. These are tilted for the angle of that spring. And now what we'll do is we can take up the tension in those by hand. Yep, they are loose enough that I can twist them by hand. And as we use the jack to take up the slack, we will take that up, slowly cranking on those by hand so that they are moving with the spring. That way, as these gaps close, we are past the point where they wouldn't fit in. Now I have jacked it up a little bit, done those up by hand, jacked up a little more, done it up by hand, and now we're pretty compressed. You can see it's getting a little bound up here. Those are still adjustable by hand, and taking the tension now. These are currently set at almost max camber, likely just to be symmetric with the other side. Now when I mark these with this Sharpie, I'm going to do it on two sides because there is some error there. There'll be a little gap with no mark, but with it on two sides, I can line that nut up and see that the gaps are equal, and then I'll end up in the same place. I really only need to mark two of these, but I will do three just to be sure we end up back where we were. And then this is a metric 12. Now this is where a specialized tool is required. This is a 21mm nut and a 7mm hex. You can either buy a 21mm socket with an opening on the side and then an angled 7mm to hold it still, and then use a regular socket to undo it. Or you can, there are several strut kits on Amazon where you can buy a whole kit of pass-through sockets. And here we're using the 21mm pass-through socket onto the top nut, and that is a pass-through socket with a 7mm hex on a regular ratchet handle to undo that. So now I'm going to release the jack tension. Comes back down. Free floating. We can push it down and wiggle it out from on top of that spring. You do need to use the space up here, especially that most inner stud is difficult to wrangle out, so popping it over and then into that large hole and then angling it out will help. So that is out now. Keep in mind that the strut top here can be pushed down. It takes a little bit of force, but if you can get a tool on it, sometimes that helps. But you can push it down, it will slowly come back up, so if it's interfering with you getting it out. One thing to keep in mind, that with these on here, it's very easy to twist this spring, and the mount on this end, you want the end of the spring snug into that. So make sure that we are, in this case, fully clockwise before applying the new top. So here we have the stock camber plate as it's come out of the car. Off that we will take the rubber that sits on the spring and the metal plate, which I've popped off already off here from that. This is the bearing for the stock that stays in place, or we won't use it. It can just pop out, but we don't need it. Here we have the replacement. There's a nut. There's a washer in here. There's the lock washer. And then we flip her over. We take the roller bearing. That goes on first. The metal plate and the rubber for the spring which allows the spring to rest on here. With this being in deeper, that's where the end of the spring will be, and then steering freedom. And that will go into the car. The front of the vehicle is this way. This is the left-hand side. So we are leaning the top of the strut inward. And then this will go in there, and this will go onto the piston. When putting the new camber plate in, rock the strut out from under the holes, push the new camber plate up into its place, and then rock the strut back in under it. That seems to have worked a lot better. So now I'm just going to put that up in there. With that resting on the top, we will be able to use the jack to push it up into its spot, putting tension on it, undo up the bolts and the center nut, and then with the jack fully up, we can take the tension off these compressors as we lower it down, the same as when we went up. So I've just started putting some pressure on the jack. As it's coming up, I can move the strut top and keep it aligned with the center as the jack comes up. Don't know if you can see that. Okay, so I kept it aligned, kept jacking it up. Now we're fully seated. Don't think we've got weight off the car yet, but certainly enough so that the top nut is now ready to receive. Ready to receive the washer and the nut. We'll also apply the 3 nuts to these ones, just loosely. And then all of this will be supported. We will continue to jack up to take tension off the compressors, just so that we can start undoing them. Oh, that one's already loose enough. This one's still got a little tension, so we might have to go up a little before we can start undoing that one. Or we can use the spanner on the top. And then it's a matter of just coordinating the unjack and taking the compressors tension away and remove them when we're full droop, and then tighten everything up and we're good. So now all bolts at the top have been snugged up, nut here, and the top nut 22mm with the 7 hex pass through. This you could do with a regular spanner and a Allen key, because the nut is proud. And here we see a spanner being used on the top nut. Now both the top nut and the sway bar link lower nut, you cannot use a torque wrench on them, because you need to put the thing that's holding the shaft still through the center. But we do know how long the spanner is. So we can compute how much force we need to put at the length of the spanner. And then if we use a luggage scale to measure that force, we can get a very good torque set. And now in this case, we're after 52 foot-pounds. If I take foot-pounds and divide them by feet, I end up with pounds. So if we know our spanner is 10.5 inches, that's 10.5 divided by 12, that's how many feet it is. We take our 52 divided by the feet of our lever, and we know how many pounds we need to be pulling with the luggage scale. I'm watching the 7mm socket to see if I need to brace the center there. So far it hasn't moved. It did eventually move, and I had a brace against it. We can do the same thing for the lower link nut. Here we got 7.25 inches. We need 30 foot-pounds, so we end up with 49.6 pounds is what we need to pull on the spanner. That means that goes on there. This goes on here. And my scales, which are currently reading pounds, gets hooked onto there. And we're going to pull until we see our number. When torquing up the drop link, it can be difficult to use a short spanner as it requires so much force to be pulled on it, but we can still do the luggage trick just using 2 wrenches, spanners, to you put the ring around one end of this, and this gives you a lot more leverage. And now when we measure from the pivot point, which is the center of the 16 mil, to where we will be pulling with the scales, we get 15.5 inches. So we'll plug that in, and then if you want, you can use a regular socket for the T30. That will also give you more leverage, make it a little easier. And then with everything tightened up, we're ready to do the other side. Now once the other side is done and all tightened up, then we're on to getting the car aligned and seeing what gains we got. So here are my alignment sheets for before with the stock setup, and after on the right with the camber plates installed. And we can see that on the front, for camber, we've gone from about minus 1.3 to minus 2.4, a gain of about minus 1.1 degrees. That gets us a little bit of a gain. If you want more than that, then you're going to have to go to lower control arms with tie rod ends also, because the tie rod end threads are not long enough once you start pushing the bottom of the wheel out. So with that, I'm happy with my 2.4 and I'm off to the track.